Unlawful detention occurs when a person's freedom is restricted without legal justification as provided for in the Constitution of the country. While it might seem insignificant to many, it has far-reaching implications, for instance, in how investors view such a society. Now, this is just a tiny part of the ongoing justice system reform that we've been having in the country. Where is that line between crime and national development? How does corruption tell on public perception of the society? We'll be answering these questions and more in the course of the program. My name is Leah today. You're welcome. In 2020, Nigeria obtained a $3.4 billion facility from the IMF, which was practically her share of the fund to mitigate the effect of COVID-19 pandemic. The status of that rapid financing instrument leads the trend table. As of April 30, 2025, Nigeria has fully repaid the financial support of about $3.4 billion it requested and received in April 2020 from the International Monetary Fund (IMF) under the Rapid Financing Instrument to help alleviate the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic and the sharp fall in oil prices. The fund, in a statement, said Nigeria is expected to honor some additional payments in the form of special drawing rights charges of about $30 million annually. In line with the IMF's Article of Agreement, these charges levied at the SDR interest rate, which is updated at the beginning of each week, apply to the difference between Nigeria's SDR holdings and its cumulative SDR allocation. The net payment of the charges stops when Nigeria's SDR holdings reach the cumulative allocation amount. Nigeria has approved a $652 million China Exim Bank funding package for construction of a road to move goods from the Lekki Deep Sea Port and Dangote Refinery in Lagos to the southern states of the country. Dave Umahi, Minister of Works, in a statement disclosed that the financing was approved by the Federal Executive Council. President Bola Tinubu has announced that the federal government will bar all ministries, departments and agencies (MDAs) from procuring foreign goods and services where local alternatives exist. The directive was one of the key resolutions adopted at the week's Federal Executive Council (FEC) meeting and was shared in a statement issued by Sunday Diary, Special Advisor on Media and Public Communication to President Tinubu through his official X account. Government explains that the move is part of a broader effort to strengthen local industries and reduce import dependency. The Nigerian Education Loan Fund (NEL Fund) says that any illegal deductions from students' loan will be treated as a criminal offense and vows to hold institutions accountable if they violate the terms and conditions associated with funds disbursed on behalf of students. Managing Director of NEL Fund, Akintunde Sawyer, who made the disclosure, stated that the fund is committed to paying all registration charges required of students to access classes for lectures, tutorials and exams, among others. He said that so far 303 institutions have been paid on behalf of 293,000 students. The Federal Ministry of Education has signed a Memorandum of Understanding (MOU) with the Rural Electrification Agency (REA) under the federal government's Energizing Education Program (EEP) to provide 24 hours electricity on campuses. This will see REA provide clean energy to 8 new universities in the next phase of the EEP. The ministry reaffirmed its commitment to advancing the transformative agenda through continued collaboration with the REA and institutional partners across the nation and beyond. Next is our policy conversation on crime and national development. Sections 34, 35, and 41 of the 1999 Constitution of the Federal Republic of Nigeria guarantee the rights to dignity of persons, personal liberty, and freedom of movement. These rights imply that no one shall be arbitrarily arrested. Anyone arrested shall be brought before a court of competent jurisdiction within a reasonable time, otherwise such detention is unlawful. And where a person is lawfully detained, it shall be under humane conditions. We shall be considering illegal detentions, crimes, corruption, and national development in this episode of the program. Joining me for this conversation is Gloria Mabeiam Ballason, Chief Executive Officer and founder of the House of Justice Group, Principal Partner, MIVE Legals, and Executive Director and founder of the Molluma Yakubu Center for Medical Law and Mass Atrocities Prevention. Glad to have you, Gloria, on the program.
Thank you. It's a privilege to be here.
Thank you. For starters, how are we still talking illegal detentions in 2025?
You will talk about illegal detention in a country that does not see the rule of law as the primary concept to go by. Where you have a situation where those in government usurp the powers of the law and tinker with it the way they want to, and treat the Constitution as though it's a list of suggestions, then you will continue to have this kind of conversation about illegal detention, because illegal detention at the heart of it is about people who assume that they have powers, usurping, taking over those powers, and ensuring that people who are not supposed to be in detention are detained. And they can only do that because they can get away with it. And so that speaks directly to impunity.
For context now, what is the position of the law on detention?
Section 35 of the 1999 Constitution speaks directly to what detention should be for it to be legal. You have the concept of legal detention and, of course, illegal detention, and you also have arbitrary detention. Illegal detention is detention that is not in accordance with the law. Arbitrary detention is when you now go to detain people and it is not in accordance with due process. In Nigeria, we have the situations where you have both. So illegal detention would then be a situation where people in the executive, or people who have powers, will ensure that people are taken behind bars and are confined in places where ordinarily they shouldn't be confined. To put it in a manner that makes it perhaps even more starkly, it is where you reduce a human being to a chattel, determining when the person can move and when they cannot. And that's because you are able to carry on powers and use it to hold those people in spaces that they otherwise would not want to be in. And so this illegal detention does not respond to the concept of law. You can also have arbitrary detention, and that would then be a case where there is a process of law that has been triggered, but the people have no business being in detention. Take, for instance, those who are in the prisons or are in the police stations for allegations of crimes. Some of them may have even been granted, bail by the court, and they are still in detention. Some of them, they may have been judgment and they are still in detention. Some of them have no business being in detention because they have even served the term for what they have been alleged, for the offenses they have been alleged to have committed. So say, for instance, if someone is held in detention for, let's say, causing hurt, and the person is there perhaps for 6 years, 8 years, then that's arbitrary detention. They have overstayed their time for the crime. So they've done the crime, they've done the time, but they're still in detention. So that's the difference between illegal detention and arbitrary detention.
It is reported that the number of those awaiting trial are more than the actual convicts. Is that peculiar to us?
Well, in Nigeria, that has been the case for a long time. And certainly it is not international best practice. There is no criminal system or justice system anywhere in the world that has a justifiable reason for having people who are just alleged to have committed crimes to be the ones populating the prisons or detention centers. Why should people be in detention if they have not committed any offenses? Is a fundamental question to ask. But our justice system has continued to have that kind of situation. And part of this is a question of corruption. because the more people you have in detention, the more the votes on the feeding. But it's also an indictment to our justice system, the inability to ensure that only those who should be behind bars are those who are behind bars. Because also there is the duty by the chief judge of every state to visit detention centers to ensure that those who have no business being there are not there. And so if we continue to have this as a recurring conversation, it means that we have not been able to prioritize this as a serious human right concern that it is. And also we have not been able to speak about the corruption that goes on. You would know that time and again we see in the news how much is voted for feeding of the prisoners. But then it's a stark difference from what the kind of feeding that those behind bars receive. So where are the monies going to? And also if we have a justice system where there are more people who are just awaiting trial, who are in prison or correctional centers, then you're not correcting anything. What you're doing is fostering a situation or an environment where those who are innocent would then intermingle with criminal elements, and you can have the diffusion that goes on there. And so we have a system that criminalizes the innocent. There is a presumption in law based on Section 36 of the 1999 Constitution that people are presumed to be innocent until they are proven guilty. Time and again, we see that presumption being tilted on its head, that people are presumed guilty until they can prove their innocence. And once you do that, you cause an indictment on the system, on the justice system, and you also do not allow for the public to have trust in the process of law and the justice system as well.
And among those people, we have minors now. We've seen that in recent time, minors are behind bars, incarcerated with adults. What does that do to the average child? And how do we allow these things to happen?
There are juvenile homes and there are juvenile institutions that have been set up by the government to be able to attend to, if you like, crimes that are committed by young persons who have not reached the age of accountability. I know that there's one in Kaduna. There are a couple of them around the country. If we have young people who are taken to the prisons, then it's the wrong place for them to be. They have no business being there. Because you need to put them in the kind of facility that allows them not to graduate from that entry point of criminality to becoming hardened criminals. So you want to be able to cross-correct by ensuring that you put them within the age bracket and you are able to handle them the right way that they should be handled, so that you can cause a reversal of that bad character, and then you're able to then take them back to the society for them to continue. But once you put them in the place where you have adults, then they become very susceptible to higher crimes than they have known. To be fair and to be true to the facts, you also have young people who commit heinous crimes. Our society is becoming more and more criminalized. You may perhaps know that in 2024, Nigeria was rated the second most criminalized country in Africa. It's the 6th in the world in terms of terrorism. We're the 8th based on the Global Terrorism Index, but the Global Crime Index says that we are the 6th. So when you look at that, it means that there is a graduation of criminality by young people. We speak about it more with the issue of cyber crimes. And we have cyber crimes that now go hand in hand with real human rights violations and criminality. The young people would say, we'll call it Yahoo Plus, where you have people who are killed. And I'm sure you've seen this over and over again. The Nigerian news space is inundated by the number of young people who carry on heinous acts, kill their girlfriends, do organ harvesting, do the most heinous things. But again, there has to be a justice system that is effective enough to respond to this kind of crimes. And the justice system cannot work in isolation. You don't work only at the end point. You want to work at the point where crime takes its root. What kind of society do we have? And I'm careful to put that in such a way that we don't imagine that these young people are victims of society. I'm reminded of the experience of Lee Kuan Yew in 1994, where in Singapore, there was Michael Fay, who was sentenced to caning. And the American president, it was President Clinton at the time, tried to get some kind of amnesty. To which Lee Kuan Yew said that as a country, Singapore will not waive that sanction, because if they do to that young person, then they will not be able to effect that sanction on the young people who commit such crimes in their country or even other foreigners. And he said something stark. He said they do not have such a thing as a victim of society. In Nigeria, every time we speak about crime, we want to give it a liberal context. So you find people saying that you cannot have people behave different from their environment. So there seems to be a profiling of the Nigerian environment as a criminal environment, as though it were something that is sniffed in the air. Nothing could be further from the truth. People commit crimes because they can get away with it. People commit crimes because it is easy for the society to allow them to assimilate back, so they don't stick out as sore thumbs. It's almost normalized. But once you have a justice system that puts action and consequence in such a direct connection, then you have less crime being perpetrated. But that also means that you have to be able to have a society where the leadership itself has the moral authority to define what crime is, that the concept of right and wrong is tied to the value system of the country. In Nigeria, the Constitution speaks to our values, but then those are values that are often respected in breach rather than in compliance. So once you have a leadership and even a kind of calibration where people in authority see crime as a way to show that they are higher than the society, or even infractions. So if you see, for example, somebody in the road safety driving against traffic and blaring the siren, and yet wanting to hold other citizens responsible, or you see government people driving against beyond the speed limit, and they want the rest of the people to then obey the speed limit, then effectively you cannot have the law speaking louder than what the leadership does. Because what you're doing is to say that when you are in a place of authority, break the rules hard enough to show that you are over the law. So if we're going to have a country that is effective in terms of how it responds to criminality, then nobody must be treated above the law and nobody must be treated beneath it.
Talking about beating traffic, you just cited that example now, and there's been a whole lot that happens in that space, actually, which also interests me, for the fact that security operatives will beat traffic, civilians will follow them, but the police at the next junction will pick on those civilians and allow their comrades to go away. And you find that even in offices, I mean, overzealousness, people acting on behalf of executives that didn't send them on any errand at all to do these things. And you also find civilians perpetrating these things. I have somebody, I know somebody, do you know who I am, is very popular in Abuja. Why is the reform for this sector taking such a long time for citizens to feel the impact?
In any sector, you cannot have any form of reform without character reform. If you like tinker with the laws on elections however you would, if the character is not reformed, you find people still breaking the rules, breaking the law, and making things difficult. And so the first scenario that you described about how that somebody will, those who are in uniform can beat traffic and other civilians will come afterwards, and then those who are in uniform beat the traffic and are not held accountable. It just shows that the system assumes that these people are above the law, and that there are some people who should obey the law, even when those who, create the laws break it. And once you have that kind of scenario where people don't even have the moral restraint to be able to do the right thing, then you continue to have this thing where right is tied to might. People saying, do you know who I am? Because they know that the law can be the next uncle who is an authority, rather than the law itself speaking a persistent language no matter who is involved. So we need to have this kind of enlightenment. But like I said, there is something about leadership having the right, the moral authority to govern. And once there is the leadership that doesn't have the moral authority to govern, they may have the power, but they will lack the authority to be able to assert the right things that should be done. So we need to be able to raise the bar of leadership in our country. We need to be able to make for certain demands that people who are in authority at every level are not just people who have the book knowledge or who have been there over time, but people who have the right moral authority, that they can be able to lead in such a way that people follow them based on what they see them do. So as much as we want to make this technical in our country, we have to get back to the basics, where we require much more from our leadership, and to whom much is given, much is expected.
What does this do to our development as a country and a society? I mean, you've raised some of these observations, and out there, when you go, you carry a green passport, you get this kind of look, and of course you're treated differently. If they're picking out 3 people, for instance, at some airports, and they want to profile or check for whatever it is for security reasons, they will definitely pick out a Nigerian amongst those 3. What does this do to our development?
In the Southeast, you would know that because of the activities of IPOP and some criminal elements, people don't even go to trade on certain days of the week. It's not a national legislation. It's not holiday. It's that a few people decided there will be lord and masters. And so they've stopped people to go to trade. Now, if you want to look at the kind of revenue that is lost just as a result of that, you can only best imagine it. If we move to the Northeast, where the challenge of insurgency has been there for a long time, and it escalated from 2009, and we continue to deal with it even now, you find that businesses have shut down. You find that more people are out of school. You find that institutions are not able to run. You find that the public live in fear. So it's a whole dimension. And we could also speak about that even in the South, where you also have some of the challenges of insecurity that goes on. We were dealing with oil bunkering at some point, but then the government has also found, and some people who make merchandise of criminality, they have found a way to strike deals with those who are into oil bunkering, just so that they can kind of taper that down. The revenue that is lost for that, for just because crimes perpetuate, is directly proportional to the kind of development we can have or underdevelopment. No society is able to build itself or to develop in a climate of fear. And crime puts people under such fear, crime and terrorism, it puts people under such fear that they are not able to translate what they're able to do from their heads to reality. You also have the kind of capital flight that goes on with more people who have the capacity, and they're now moving out of the country. So businesses have moved from Nigeria elsewhere. Businesses have shut down. Those who can generate income and also be able to create employment for people. A lot of those people are moving out of the country because there is a climate of fear. So once you have that kind of situation, you continue to see that there will be underdevelopment. You know that one of the major challenges that the people have under the Tinubu government is the biting economy, that there are more people now who are living beneath the poverty line, and people rarely are able to just get by and stitch body and soul together just to make it another day. And you will continue to have that happen if you are not able to secure the society, to ensure that people are able to run their businesses, and also to ensure that the economy provides that there is such a level playing ground or a conducive environment for people to get more economically viable in terms of their activities, so that they will be able to self-sustain themselves. So national development, there is a straight line that runs from criminality to national underdevelopment. And any set of professionals who are looking to ensure that we have a country that works have to be able to see that. Now, let's go back again to the example of Malaysia, which we often talk about in our country. We will cite how that it moved from a third world country to a first world country. These things are they're not happenstance. They don't just happen. You cannot have economic development without having a justice system that also responds to that kind of growth. So your justice system, as viable as it is, will also allow for the economy to grow. Every system needs to work so that you can then have a society that works. What is a system? In basic biology, we talk about the cell, and then the cell will give birth to the tissue will give birth to the organ, and then the organ will give birth to a system. So once you have a break or you have a malfunctioning of any of those parts, the system will be affected. And so in thinking about national development, we have to think about it from the broad spectrum of ensuring that every sector works, that the justice system needs to work, that the legislature needs to work, that the executive needs to work. That just because you have power in the executive doesn't mean you shouldn't be accountable with power. Picking up your citizens every now and again and detaining them undermines the public trust that the public would have on institutions. It also undermines the rule of law, but it also demystifies what that government is. A government that works should be a government that respects the rule of law. So once you're not able to ensure that these systems work in synergy, that crime is in such a way that it doesn't thrive easily in a society, then you're going to have underdevelopment.
Well, sincerely, thank you, Gloria, for making our time for this conversation and for sharing your thoughts with me.
My pleasure.
This entire conversation is available on YouTube at our channel. Next is Simplify This, and from there we take you to the market space. For more on rates from markets across the country, do well to log on to our sister website. It is www.marketnigeriatv.com. We have all the market details and more there for you. And until we come your way again, same time next week, don't forget to keep talking and doing business. Send in your questions, comments, and suggestions because we value them to help us serve you better. Have a beautiful day and God bless Nigeria.